Hey, everybody, welcome back. It is Q Live. We are here at Fall Q. Thanks for joining us again. I know I said again. They said that in Top Gun. Do you remember that, Steven?
I do, unfortunately.
You did. Yeah. Again. Every once in a while that sneaks in. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but fantastic movie. We're here again. I'll have to throw in some Top Gun quotes and references as we talk. My goodness. I am Bill Selleck. I am Director of Technology at Hillbrook School in Los Gatos, California. Pronouns are he, him. The director or the chair of the Communications Committee, the ComCom. We host Q Live, and we are so excited to have you join us again. And Steven, so excited to have you on the show. Can you introduce yourself? Let us know who you are.
Sure. My name is Steven Speciale. My pronouns are he, him. I am a teacher at Loyola High School of Los Angeles. I teach music, music appreciation, AP theory, and I work in the theater and do choir.
Nice. Fantastic. So we were talking before we were recording. I taught fourth and fifth grade music for about 4 years. So we'll have to not
Yeah,
get too
fantastic.
geeky with some of the projects. But you're doing a Q boom. We were just talking about it. Can you share with people what your boom is about and how you kind of think about doing these projects with your students?
Sure. I've tried to cram quite a bit into a 3-minute segment, but I've cultivated a way to incorporate contemporary art into contemporary art projects and modeling how to think like an artist into the way I teach curriculum with project-based curriculum. And because of contemporary art, I've also found the places for the intersectionality with social justice issues. So that's the subject of my Q boom.
Nice. That sounds really cool. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how social justice fits in with like a more traditional music curriculum. Tell me, maybe some of those projects, kind of how you're thinking about it, maybe how you explain it to your students. It sounds
Sure.
incredible.
Well, like in a music appreciation course, which is, ostensibly a music history course, um, oftentimes traditionally they've been kind of a Western Civ, survey course. Um, but I thought of ways to incorporate, a more inclusive history. And certainly we in America and the world's music, and especially the world's popular music, is highly influenced by African American music and the genius of so many African American musicians and composers. So I thought, well, a great way to celebrate this, but also reveal some of the uh, associated uh, history. Have an entree to be able to talk about things like whitewashing or the appropriation of Black music would be
Absolutely.
to learn about this music and the artists and the composers in a celebratory way, so that we're not focusing on just Black trauma and perhaps just further traumatize students of color, or fall into the trap of white saviorism, or even like exoticizing these things, or virtue signaling by saying, oh, we're covering these things, and then going back to uh, curriculum as it always was. So I try to come up with an essential question and focus on celebrating that music, and then by cultivating a conversational classroom culture, to set lots of ground rules and have these discussions often, so that we can talk about these difficult things. I don't think it's a good idea to just jump into a social justice issue with no prep. Um, that that leaves the door open for a lot of confusing things, and again, could further traumatize uh, students, unintentionally. It doesn't matter what your intention is, but the classroom isn't the place to work out your issues. So actually I have an example. Um, so I came up with a project called Bluesbirds, and using like Photoshop or even Apple Pages, anything with an alpha tool. We're taking uh, Audubon birds, and John Audubon had his own sort of traumatic racialized pass, which may or may not be true, but it doesn't matter because it's still a confused subject for us today. So we take an Audubon bird and with an alpha tool or even scissors, cut out parts of those images and then collage it with a prominent African-American artist to be celebrated. So in this case, I've got Little Richard and Fats Domino in this bird. And then what I do is we print them on transparency and put the transparency on cyanotype fabric.
Ooh.
And then with the fabric, we can make these little stuffed animals. Nice. So a very simple technology, even old school stuff, we hand sew these things. But on the flip side, if you flip the image in reverse, you can make a second collage. And in this case, it's an opportunity to investigate artists that may have whitewashed or appropriated those artists. So Pat Boone, a white artist, made his career off hits by Fats Domino and Little Richard. And Pat Boone ended up being the second highest grossing artist after Elvis.
Wow.
So even though, we do know Fats Domino and Little Richard today, but it was decades before we realized what kind of innovators they were. And so this is a great opportunity to not only celebrate these people, but to also acknowledge this difficult history without focusing on the trauma.
Yeah.
These things can be taken, steps further too. Like we'll make a larger one. So this one is perhaps even more contemporary. This is about DJ Screw, who was a Houston rapper and producer from the 90s, early 2000s, who invented, or at least made popular, the chopped and screwed technique. And, it's become a definite subculture of hip hop. And Beyonce's used some of the techniques. It was used in the soundtrack to Moonlight to sort of set the tone for this, southern setting in the movie. And a TikToker with a fairly sizable following attributed the chopped and screwed technique, called it slowed plus reverb, and attributed it to another producer, and a white producer. And she's a white teen, and got all kinds of backlash for it. And it's because DJ Screw is no longer with us. In some ways, she has more sort of cultural capital with TikTok and having a large following. And so it's an example of Black erasure, despite what her intentions would have been. And so this gives us an opportunity to discuss things in a very contemporary realm, and another opportunity for technology. Because it's a toy, we put a little and we can make a sound design that gets loaded into the toy.
What? I gotta know, how'd you do that? What are you, and there's a bunch of ways to do it.
There's lots of ways to do it. So I got one of these things off probably Amazon, just a little loadable trigger for these things. But the soundscape and the sound design could be done in Audacity, which is cross-platform and free, GarageBand. It could even be done on mobile devices. So it's another opportunity to use technology, but it gives a really targeted expressive purpose, so that it's, it goes with an object. It's something that's tangible, pretty easily accessible. These are not expensive. Yeah. And Audacity is free. And so it's an interesting way to be able to interact with the technology. And then once you have these files, there are lots of things that you can do with them. So
that is so cool. Steven, I feel like I could ask you like 30 more questions. I am like, yeah, captivated by all the things you are sharing. We're getting to about where our time is. Yep. I did want to share that this reminds me so much. Did you happen to catch the Radiolab series, The Vanishing of Harry Pace?
Yes. And it's right? Been a real inspiration. Yeah.
Harry Pace, a Black entrepreneur, the
Yes,
turn of last century. And as the title Vanishing, goes to show, he ended up having the first Black-owned, all-Black musician record label
that's
in
right.
like the 19 teens and the
Yes,
1920s, and ended up selling all of those to white record labels. So
yep.
that's definitely in line with what you're talking about.
Right. Well, and the
Also,
fact that we don't know his name
yeah, that's part of why,
is
even though we're
evidence
a little
of,
bit over, where we normally are with our time, like you got to mention the name. Like if this
yeah,
is sounding at all interesting to you and you want to go deeper dive into it, that Radio Lab podcast is a great
it is.
place,
It's
to learn
phenomenal.
some more. I also appreciate the care that you're putting into this. I think a lot of
Thank you.
educators are noticing the importance of doing their own work around, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and action. And I'll speak for myself, certainly as a straight white male. There's so many ways that it can be scary for me, and that I don't have to do something, right? And so to go into that and thoughtfully go into that and know that it might not go perfectly well. It's something that I'm still not comfortable doing, but that I know I need to be doing, and just leaning into that space that we definitely need to be leaning into as educators. This
Hmm.
is such a cool overlap, with like some pretty cool tech. You keep saying it's simple. That's a pretty cool workflow, and the technology's
Thank you.
old, but it's one of those where
Yes,
I can see people looking at it and going like, "Oh my gosh, that's kind of
but
overwhelming." But
that's
every
something
step
I've
along the way,
always,
right?
thank you. It's something I've always thought
Yeah,
about, that it doesn't have to be latest and greatest. It just has
yeah,
to work. And
yeah.
yeah,
I love that. And I also love that had we not led with you being, high school music teacher, I don't know that people would have guessed that,
mm,
right?
thank you.
Which I think is like a great way of noticing when projects are really about the student and about like an experience, and less about, this is my content area, right? Like
Hmm.
I don't get that vibe at all. So
Thank
I
you.
think it's such a great example of where you can start like with a discipline, and like this is your job title. It has, an academic area, but you can really, broaden it in some really interesting ways.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank
So
you.
before you
When,
go, yeah, go
yes.
ahead.
Oh, I just want to make sure that my inspiration for this project came from Kerry James Marshall and his Blackbirds paintings that came out during the pandemic, or at least the show came out during the pandemic. Um, so a tremendous artist and a really amazing thinker, and his work was the inspiration for this.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I was going to throw in, as we kind of talked over each other, this is all of the people dropping the mic for the Q booms. Steven, I see you there in the bottom right corner. There's a great story. We'll have to have you back on the show at some point to hear the story of that photo. That's a piano behind you. It
Yeah.
looks like almost like you're at Dodger Stadium or something. It's not. Yeah, that's another fantastic story. Look at all these amazing humans on here giving their 3-minute talks. I mean, you all just heard Steven talk for, what, we're like at about 13 minutes here. I could hear him for another 30 minutes for sure. It's going to be exciting hearing that 3-minute talk. And as a reminder, if you've missed some of these recordings, some of these presentations in person, Fall Q goes all the way until 22. That rhymes. That could be like an A-B pattern right there. I'm not a singer, but I can write really bad lyrics. Yeah, I mean, you have access to these Q booms whenever you may be watching this through the end of 2021. Until 2022, you have Fall Q. Maybe that's the rhyme. What do you think? Do you have anything better for me?
No, no, that was very
All right.
good.
Fair enough. Very last thing, Stephen, how can humans find you if they want to learn more and continue the conversation?
My stuff comes up if you Google my name. I'm also known as Toy Piano Cat. I'm most
Awesome.
active on Instagram and YouTube.
Great. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And
Thanks
to
for
all of
having me.
you, thank you so much for joining us for another